and welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Suzanne Keilly. She's an actress and writer whose credits include Ash vs. the Evil Dead, Light as a Feather, and Leprechaun Returns, among many others. She was also the screenwriter for last year's witty and fantastic Slumber Party Massacre remake, which is currently available on VOD and will be given a physical release tomorrow as of the publication of this episode. Welcome to the show!
Thank you. I didn't even know that. How did you know that?
I'm in the know, man. I get emails sometimes and Shout is like, it's coming out February 1st. So
nice.
Yeah. So thank you so much for doing this. Really excited to chat with you. But one of the things we like to do at the start is kind of take it back to the very beginning. How did you get introduced to horror?
Okay. So I guess I would say, is that I was terrified of everything when I was a kid. Just everything. I couldn't watch commercials on television for horror movies, trailers or TV spots. Children's stories that had villains, I couldn't listen to because I was so terrified of any bad thing. I grew up Catholic, which I think might have something to do with that. And I was also really terrified of being possessed, like the devil was going to come for me because I was bad, And so I went to a Catholic. Had to go to church every Sunday, and I went to a Catholic grammar school. And
where did you grow
up? That was
up?
really ingrained in me in New Jersey, in northern New Jersey.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And yeah, and in a town near. Usually the town people know in northern New Jersey is like Hackensack.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anyway, so I I could never sleep. And so I remember telling my mom once, I was like, I don't know what to do. I go to bed and all I do is think of scary things so I can never sleep. And her advice to me was, well, it's because you're trying not to think about them. And because you're trying not to think about them, you think about them more. Mm-hmm. So if you let yourself think about them, then you probably will stop thinking about them. And so I took that a little overboard and started sort of embracing all of the things that scared me. So I started, if there was something scary on TV, I would just force myself to sit down and watch it. If there was something in a book or whatever, a story, I would force myself to see it through to the end so that I could embrace everything that terrified me, and then I, could move on. So I sort of forced myself to start watching horror movies and found after a while that I really loved them.
So, do you remember, the first movies you watched that, you started watching to push yourself into horror?
Gosh, I don't. I have such a terrible, memory of, when and what I watch, which is why, when, we were talking about I don't know if we want to talk about it yet, but, the movie that, when you asked me about it, that's the one that immediately came into my mind, because I just remember it so clearly, and I remember being so terrified by it. But I remember more just religion scared me the most. So anything. So I probably watched those the least, but no, I don't really remember specifically. The movies that I ended up I loved or. Yeah, I don't know. I can tell you ones that I love and remember, but I couldn't tell you the order or why.
So what are some of the ones that you remember really loving as a kid?
Well, Poltergeist.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I feel like because we were not allowed to have cable, I feel like a lot of the movies I watched were a lot, older, probably a decade older, and that I would watch on late night television. Yeah. My parents were divorced, and my mom started working, and then she started dating, and my brothers went to live with my grandparents, And so I was home alone a lot. And so I would just, if my mom would go out, I would just stay up and watch like random things on television.
Right. Yeah, I think I had a similar childhood in the regards to the cable, where I never had cable. I didn't have cable until I was a freshman in college. Like that was the first time I'd ever had cable. So I understand that sort of like late night, trying to catch whatever you can on television aspect for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was like, so like, what were some of the movies you really loved watching? Like, do you remember?
Oh, right. Oh, I started to say that, and then I just drifted onto something else. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
I was like reminiscing, and then I was just like, I remember like sitting on my couch in our family room watching, TV, and didn't even say what it was. I said Poltergeist and moved on. And what else? Oh my gosh, what did I watch? I remember loving Time Bandits.
Oh, Time Bandits, yes. That's a wild one.
I guess that's not horror.
There's some kind of horrific things in it.
I remember loving Leprechaun when I saw it. I love showmanship in a movie. I love a monster, and I you know what I mean? I just love showmanship in general. And so like anything that's just like out there and bizarre is I really appreciate. So yes, like something like Time Bandits, that it just goes off the rails, is something that I really appreciate. What? Oh, I remember this like 70s movie that really scared me. It was called Race with the Devil, which was Peter Fonda.
That name is so familiar. Not Peter Fonda.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Which is, it was on like TV recently, and I rewatched it. What? Oh no, I don't know. I'm just hemming and hawing. I don't know. What'll happen, because this always happens, is about 10 minutes from now we'll be talking about something else, and then I'll start yelling out movies that I remember.
Do. If that happens, please do.
Yeah,
please.
Because now I just feel like I'm saying really old movies that weren't like I don't know. And I'm looking. I was like, I wrote stuff down. Did I write? Oh, Gremlins. I actually wrote stuff down.
So were you a child of the 80s? Okay.
Yes.
So was I.
Yes. Oh, yeah, look. Dead Zone.
Oh, wow.
Fright Night.
Fright Night. Love that one.
Fright Night.
Yes. See, I did write stuff down. Oh, yeah. All right. Right, so I did April Fool's Day.
Oh, we just watched that, both of us, recently, and Muffy St. James, what a queen!
I haven't seen it in so long.
It's ridiculous.
It's
incredible. It is so much fun.
Oh, Tremors! But I guess I was,
A lot of
Tremors
like monsters. I see definitely
favorite.
that monster influence there, and like the kind of the
I love
big
a monster.
Mm-hmm. So was that when you were a kid? Is that what you kind of gravitated to? Was the monster movies?
I think so. Anything that was a little bit like outlandish was more. I could appreciate more, because it didn't. Anything silly didn't scare me as much. Or like I said, I grew up Catholic, and so I couldn't watch, like I didn't watch The Exorcist. I think I saw it the first time when they like re-released it.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
In like 2000, like in the early 2000s, I think was the first time I ever actually saw it, because I still a little bit, I'm just like very afraid of being possessed. And so like anything with a cult, like has a, even if it's not necessarily possessed, but like a cult aspect to it, anything where someone can like steal you or make you a different, possess you or make you a different kind of person is terrifying to me.
Mary Beth could relate, especially as a kid, because you had that similar fears, didn't you, growing up?
Yes, I was raised Catholic, sort of.
Yeah.
And my dad was obsessed with like demons and exorcisms and stuff, and he was like freaked out by it. So I got kind of that fear from him, and I still am a little bit nervous about it. I don't necessarily believe in it, but that it's imprinted on my consciousness that like it's probably not real, but I don't want to play with it. If
don't want to fucking find out, right? Fuck around.
I don't want to fucking find out. Exactly. Like I'm not trying to fuck around and find out, as they say. Like I just need to leave it alone.
Yeah, because if it's true and you're taken, it's over. So best just keep it, like stay away from the Ouija board. Just stay away from anything that could,
Meanwhile,
take
I'm just
over your
like,
consciousness.
let's go grab a Ouija board. Let's go do some seances. Let's go do all that crazy stuff.
I would rather be killed by a monster because at least it's over.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just over. I don't like, but I don't want I don't want to be rotting in some like eternal horror.
Right.
I don't have the constitution for it.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
So as you grew up and became an adult, what draws you to horror now, Vice, when you were a kid?
I think I just hung on to that love of it so much. And, I kind of, to me, horror is like going on a roller coaster. I love feeling stressed out. I love that rush, and to me, it's sort of like I get a rush, a safe rush in a way. Like I can be in a theater or be at home and be scared. And I still watch movies with my hands in front of my face and I just sort of peek out in between my fingers because it truly, like, I get so scared. And I love that feeling, and it's a safe way to feel scared. And I think the world is, scary enough that with its that to me is anxiety. Like the real world is anxiety inducing, but this is sort of a fear that I can have for this amount of time, and I get this great rush out of it, and then I can move on with my day.
No, I love that because it sounds like you still get really scared at movies. Like you didn't lose that childhood fear that I feel like a lot of us have at this point, like in our lives.
Yeah, I feel like there was a period of time where I started to get jaded about a lot of things, and movies especially. And, I remember years ago, I don't remember them. Actually, I do remember, but I won't say. But there was a movie that I saw. It wasn't a horror movie, but it was a movie I saw, and I hated it. And I remember going to, work and being like, ugh, I watched the worst movie I've ever seen. And this woman she's like, what was it? And I told her, and she was like, I loved that movie. And I'm like, oh, it was so dumb. And then afterwards, I was like, why would I rob someone's joy? This woman really got something from that movie. Like, who am I to take that away from her because I didn't like it? And clearly I missed something because it meant something to her. And so I try to be more open-minded about all of the movies, anything that I see, just because I'm like, maybe there's something I'm missing if I'm not coming in from a place of like, all right, show me what you got, entertain me.
Yeah.
And so I try to be more open-minded about the things I go in. And I have to say, like, having, my 12-year-old stepson, I also try to be really thoughtful about, he's really into Marvel movies. And so we watch all of them, and if there might be something that I'm not super into, but because it brings him so much joy, I have found a joy in movies and things that I didn't think that I could. So when it's fun, when he gets scared, that we get to sort of like watch things and like hold on to each other because we know something scary is going to happen, is still like sort of makes me scared again.
That's awesome. Cool. I love that feeling. Yeah. Do you remember the last movie that really terrified you?
There's a few, but the one that it is a couple years old now, but Hereditary was so terrifying.
Take a drink, listeners.
Yeah, it's like at least 50% of people say Hereditary because it's true, because that movie is fucking horrifying.
David, my husband and I were in the theater at the time, and like I said, I watched so many horror movies, and I remember at one point like turning to him and saying, like, I don't know how much more I can take of this. Yeah. And he was like, I know, we can go. I'm like, no, I'm going to see it through. But it was so, and it combines, like, I don't want to spoil it for people that haven't seen it. But, like, fine. It was, like, you said that you've seen so many horror movies, it's hard to be shocked. And I was shocked by that scene when the little girl
loses her head.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, like, the amazing, the son, like, just sitting in the car. I was like, driving. And I was like, yes, like, what else? Like, the shock. What else would you do if, like, was a...
And the scene where he's listening to her find the body in the car.
Oh, my
Like,
God.
are you kidding me? Like, I feel nauseous just thinking about it, because it's like, I don't think anyone was ready for that movie. I feel like we were all like, it'll be fine, and then it happened to all of us, and we were just like...
Thought it was going to be a creepy kid movie. That's what I thought it was.
Yeah. And then they bring in some weird cult, and they throw the, like, possession thing at me. I'm like, this is everything that terrifies me.
Yep.
She's spider crawling across the wall, like it's
cutting
just...
off her own head with, and then the head flying up into the treehouse.
Just so much.
It sounds so crazy when you talk about it out of context, because like it makes sense in the movie, but you say it and you're like, this sounds like hot mess. Like
we were all on
gibberish.
acid or something watching this movie. Is what it sounds like.
Yes. And the tone was so amazing. It really was like, oh, this is new.
Yeah.
And I was just so that really terrified me. It's funny that I'm glad it's not just...
Yep, no, that one comes up
me,
a lot, and so does Terrified. Have you seen Terrified, the Spanish language one?
I'm writing this down.
It's on Shudder, if you have Shudder. It's
oh, I do, yes.
that movie is the other one that comes up so much, and that one is a kick to the face.
Yeah, that is one that I had to turn the lights on. That was one I actually had to turn the lights on when I watched it. And I don't do that anymore.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was fucking creepy.
Ooh, maybe I'll watch it tonight.
It's a good one. Let us know what you think if you do see it, because it's good. It's golden.
I'm so pleased. That's the nice thing about talking to people, people that enjoy horror and movies in general. So, I like I said, like I've seen so many horror movies, and then there's so many I still haven't seen. There's just, it's incredible, and subsets of movies I haven't seen, and people will mention a movie. I'm like, I've never heard it. It's like I have so many on my radar that I need to see, but there are some I haven't even heard of, and I so it's so exciting when people tell me about a new movie, because I feel like I know everything, or I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen that, or oh, I'm not sure I want to see that one. But yeah, so I get very excited when I'm given a new title.
It's a good one, let me tell you.
Yeah, someone told me recently, a friend of mine told me about a movie, and I highly recommend it. They're talking about monsters. It's a Russian movie called Sputnik.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I was just talking about this with my fiance last night. That's so funny.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah. I watched.
It's
wonderful. What, like a good.
It's so good.
I just wanted to cuddle that thing so badly. I just wanted to give it a little hug.
But he was so bad.
He was so bad. But he was so cute.
He was so bad. I know. That's the worst, when cute things are bad. Yeah. That's the worst. That just reminded me of something else we were saying about. I thoroughly enjoyed that movie, but that opening scene was so wonderful to me, because it's just these two guys in the space shuttle, or whatever it is, and having a conversation that doesn't seem like it's about anything, and it's like about everything that to come in the movie. And I love when movies are capable of doing, like, entertain me in just a random scene that means everything later. So
yeah.
Anyway, everyone should see it.
I agree. Okay, so the creative side, how did you start? How did you get interested in writing screenplays, acting, doing all that kind of creative stuff? Yeah,
so the writing part, I feel like was narcissistic, because I came to Los Angeles, because I was like, I'm going to be an actor, make a living acting, and that didn't go well. But I did do so. I found myself at one point in a theater company. And I was new to the theater company, and there were a lot of writers in the theater company, and they would write plays, and they would give out parts to the other people in the theater company, and they weren't really giving me parts because I was new, and I thought, well, I'm just going to write my own stuff and cast myself as the star. And so I did, and that's kind of how I started. I always enjoyed writing. I was always loved it, and would write poetry and short stories and things, and but writing's hard, and it's hard to motivate. And so seeing myself on stage was real motivation to write and finish things. It's really narcissistic. And then, I would tend to write like things about like, this was more, it wasn't horror actually. It was more comedy, but I always had sort of like this religious bent about it. Like I remember writing once this play about, it was like a short play about this woman going on a blind date with Jesus, and he was terrible.
That sounds awesome.
I need that. It's incredible. That's an incredible thing you just said.
He was a terrible first date. And so I wrote, so I would sort of write like weird things like that. And then I did a lot of improv and sketch comedy. I took classes at the Groundlings, and I had this like 2-woman comedy show for a while. And
Ooh.
yeah, it was really fun. And I got to travel and all these things. But I wasn't making money, so I got a job working in reality TV.
Oh, okay.
And yes, I, worked on a show called The Apprentice.
Oh.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so that was interesting.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I don't usually talk about it because I'm like, yes. But and then I got this job sort of producing this reality show in New Orleans, and was called like 13 Fears Real, and it was people, you're supposed to scare people in New Orleans. I was so miserable. It was like in the middle of the summer in New Orleans. It was so hot. It was so. At one point, I remember it was like midnight, and I'm standing in the swamp, and there was a termite swarm. And the thing is, which I didn't know, is you shouldn't scream when there's a termite storm, because when you open your mouth, they just come right in.
No.
So that was bad. And then at one point, there was like a thing where I sort of helped produce the finale, and there were only a couple contestants left, and we were on this tiny island in the middle of the swamp, and it was like 4 a.m. And I foolishly was like, well, I want to see who wins since I, produced this episode. Yeah. And so I was standing at the edge of the swamp island, tiny swamp island. I think I had been there for 14 hours already. And nobody else was there because the camera people, everyone was following the other contestants. So I'm like, I want to be there when whoever wins. So I'm standing at the edge of the swamp, complete darkness.
Oh, no.
And everyone's around, and I heard this like splashing.
Oh, no.
And I click my flashlight, and I would just see a sea of red eyes in the swamp. And I would remember just like clicking my flashlight and be like, well, I'm going to die for fucking reality TV.
At the end of a 14-hour shift on reality TV.
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? And so I'm like, this is not where I saw myself. My God. I was covered in bug bites.
I can only imagine.
Dear, like one point I had to go to the hospital because I was talking to the construction guys because we were building this like fake pyre to burn people alive, and all the guys, the local guys were like going like, oh, look at this big bug bite, look at this one, and I was like, well, look at this one, and their mouths dropped and they're like, you need to take yourself to the hospital right now. And I was like, no, it's like, they're like, that's a problem. I mean, I remember driving myself to the hospital, and I'm like, I'm going to miss the burning. But I took myself to the hospital. I remember sitting in I was like, I got bit by a thing. And I sat in the emergency, and they like wheeled this poor person in, like, on a gurney. And they took me first. Like, it turns out, like, a spider bite is worse. I guess, I don't know. Louisiana spider bite is worse, like the poor person on a gurney. And it turns out, thankfully, it wasn't, I guess, one of the bad ones. It was just really bad. Anyway, this is my long way of saying, I remember thinking on the boat ride back to base camp that I didn't want to do this anymore. And that all this time that I had been acting, every time, on stage and between these gigs, people would always come up to me afterwards and say, well, like, what else have you written? And everyone was ever like, let me put you in my movie. They're like, what else have you written? I'm like, maybe I've just been the signs have been coming. I have not been taking them. I am going to embrace a new world. And I, on the plane home, started writing a feature script, I kid you not, about a reality television producer on a swamp island and that gets attacked by zombies. And she ends up using... She was so unhappy being a reality producer, she ends up making her own horror zombie movie with the zombies that have attacked the island. It's very weird.
That's awesome.
But at any rate...
Wow.
So oddly, yes. So I did all this like comedy, but I immediately, my first thing was like, no, I just want to write horror, which obviously if you've seen anything I've written has a big comedy bent to it.
It definitely does. And I am curious because you've written on Ash vs. Evil Dead, you've did Leprechaun Returns, you've done Slumber Party Massacre. What is it like kind of playing in all these different franchises?
It's really fun because they're all franchises that I loved, and had already loved. And so it was such great luck, true fortuitous timing that I was in the right place at the right time, whether I knew it or not, to be offered these opportunities. And so, and I have to say it's, having written things that weren't based on IP, written by a franchise, my own ideas, there's something nice to it's challenging because I want to honor the material, but at the same time, it's nice to have, there's certain things you don't have to set up anymore. Right. I know who my monsters are.
Yeah.
I know what their rules are, and I kind of know the people around them. So there's sort of something nice about it that that's already a package that's handed to me that I can go, okay, well, I know what that is at least. Now I just have to create the world around it.
So what I love about Slumber Party Massacre is that this is it's technically fourth movie that is a Slumber Party Massacre movie, and they're all written and directed by women. And that's
cool,
fucking
right?
awesome.
Yeah.
So can you tell listeners a little bit about about this remake and what it's about and what you were trying to do with it?
This was one of those fortunate things that the executive at Sci-Fi that I had worked with before on Leprechaun, and a movie that I wrote for them, the original called Killer High. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't, yeah.
Talking about monsters. There's a killer warthog mascot monster.
That's amazing.
Anyway, so see, I'm terrible, right? You asked me a question and I was just thinking about something else. I'll talk about that for 10 minutes.
I love it though.
And then you'd be like, anyway, Slumber Party Massacre. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I wrote that. I'm like a 90. What's that? You wrote the movie, Suzanne. I did?
When did I do that?
Are you sure?
Does that sound like me? I don't know. It's been a long few years.
Yes, sure as hell has.
Yeah. So, Slumber Party Massacre. What can I tell you about it? Or writing this one. What was your question? How did it come about? No, you didn't ask me how it came about. I just wanted to talk about that.
Well, I that is another part I was curious about, but no, I was asking, what is it about? So for our listeners.
Oh. The one I wrote.
Yes,
or the
one that you wrote.
Just the franchise. It doesn't matter. You're not going to get the answer you want, so it doesn't matter. You can start just asking what you want. You're not getting that answer. Let's talk about French fries.
French fries are delicious.
They are delicious.
What's your favorite kind of French fry?
I love, what are they, what's the ones, I want to say, it's not, I love a curly fry, but that's not my favorite because I find them a little cumbersome to eat, but you have to like pull them, it's more work. Yeah. I just like a thin fry,
okay.
But does the thin fry have a name?
The McDonald's fry is what I always call it. The McDonald's fry.
It's the McDonald's fry, but not necessarily like a steak frite.
Okay.
But not a steak fry.
Like a shoestring fry.
Oh, I love a shoestring. Yeah. That's not what I meant, but yes, I changed my answer. Shoestring. Okay, Slumber Party Massacre. Yes. So, this is a movie about a group of friends that we can talk about spoilers now. Sure. If you haven't seen it. Yeah. That's on you, right?
Yeah.
We'll actually, listeners, if you haven't seen, you don't want to spoil it, we'll kind of put time cards in here so you can jump past. But
oh, that's nice. Yes, so it's a movie about a group of friends that decide to go to. We don't know this at first, but it's about a group of friends that go to a place where this murder was years before to find the killer because they suspect he's still alive and to take him out. And they succeed, yet they discover that there is something even worse lurking in the woods. That's not a great, I'm a terrible writer. I don't know how to.
I feel like that got there though. But so
Right?
when you were, how did you want to like make your script loyal to the original, but also your own thing? Like, what was that process like for you?
Yeah. So, I always like like I said, I when I start, I've been very lucky that the things I've got to write, I've already seen and already fans of. So first thing I do is go back and watch and kind of take some notes and things will immediately resonate for me, about a script. That would be interesting. And, the thing with Russ Thorne and the Driller Killer is he's, like his weapon. He's got kind of very specific pattern. There's not a lot. He doesn't have a big palette.
He sure doesn't.
Yeah, and so I thought, well, like maybe sometimes like the most important thing really around a killer are the people, because beyond the monster is the people that are confronting the monster, whether they know it or not, and whether they're prepared for it or not. And so I think it's always important to start with like, who are the characters that I'm going to put in harm's way, and what are their intentions, and how do I, what makes their journey of dealing with this monster interesting. And I lost my mom in 2017.
I'm sorry.
And so, thank you. Yeah. And so, which is very challenging for me, obviously, for anyone, but so that has kind of in the last few years really sort of informed where I've been coming from a place. Like, it's funny, like if you look at Leprechaun Returns, or I was like, when preparing a little bit, obviously not very much for this interview, but when I was sort of looking at my bevy of work, I was like, wow, if you look at it, it's really all about these poor women with like no moms, or like, like moms that have had some issues, a lot of dead moms, but and how they deal, and there, and so with this, I kind of went, oh wow, like I want to start and honor, I want to start with like something that happened in this place, and sometimes, by the way, it's like when I'm, particularly because the budgets, in these movies are smaller, I'm sort of there. I've been very lucky that I'm also told, like, you have free range, like, just, we don't really, like, I'll be like, this is sort of what I'm thinking. And I get to like, just go ahead and do what you want. And so I've been very lucky in that way. But sometimes, often, I, in the process of that will be like, hey, but you know what? We got this location. So go ahead and write it around that, So as much as I get free rein, there's also some limitations. And so, in this case, I knew that kind of where they were hoping it to be at a location. And so I already had that. And I thought, well, I really would like to sort of honor the original in a way, obviously not make, I tried at first really being like making it a lot of, but it was too the decade didn't quite line up with, so I just sort of went, I'm going to I get to the chance to redo it, make it the 90s. So, and then I really liked the idea of not just a group of young women that go back, but that have a real, trying to really right a wrong for a reason, and particularly because of what happened, like to like a mom that hasn't been able to move on, and a character that thinks like foolishly, because she's a kid, regardless of how smart she and her friends are, they're kids, and they have this sort of like grandiose idea that they can do what the women before could not, and particularly her mother, and in the process save her mother from the life that she is, the sort of small life that she's living. So I kind of really loved that sort of place to start. And then immediately I thought, all right, well, again, because, what we talked about Russ's palette, I thought, well, what happens if I'm talking about, women and starting from this place of women, that wouldn't be interesting if well, what's Russ's story? Like, how do you end up that person and having and being weirdly obsessed with women and carrying this drill? And I thought, well, how you grew up might also was probably a bit really informed the bad man you've become. Right. And so I thought, well, would, his parents be, or, in particular his mom be, in that case, just as much a villain. And so that sort of the first things that sort of came to me, and then I started to kind of put it together, with those ideas. One
thing that I really loved about this is that the women actually have agency, which in a lot of slashers, I don't feel, I think that's changed a lot in the last, 20 years, but particularly I rewatched, I had never seen the original Slumber Party Massacre until I watched it the weekend that I was going to sit down and watch the remake, because I was curious to see what it was all about. And I wanted to see kind of how you would take an original concept and kind of remake it and make it your own. That's one thing that I noticed in that other one. There is definitely a feminist bent to that film, but I also think that it was operating at a year at a time when you had people who were like, oh, you got it. These are the things you have to include in here. And so what I really enjoyed about your remake is that the female characters have agency. And I also love the inversion of what would we always see the stereotypical what people think of happens at a girl's slumber party. And then you have the guy slumber party. And that scene just killed me. It just killed me. Danishka, love her,
who directed the movie, gets a lot of props. Obviously, but she really took what was on the page and made it her own, wonderful, amazing thing. In my head, I originally, the way I kind of saw it, I always think it's funny, men that are, sort of are very macho guys. And then sometimes you particularly in college, and you see them do these things that are very, are very, what's the word I'm looking for? But, they're always ripping their shirts
it's
off,
very homoerotic.
And I was very homoerotic. And they don't see it, And so it's always funny to me. We're just macho. I'm no, sure, but that's not very sexy, way you don't think. And so, I just sort of saw it as men that don't realize that what they're doing is very sexual. And then Danishka really goes for it. I remember she sent me a snippet of it that I think the day that they were shooting or the day after they shot, and I was just jumping up.
Yes.
And I was so excited.
I bet that's really cool, being able to see your words get translated onto screen.
It is. It really is. And I feel so lucky too that the actors are so were so good and had such great timing and very game, and so that's so fun for me, and I was God, I hear this joke, or I hear this thing in my head, I hope they get it, and then I see it, and they did their own thing, which was even 10 times better than I could have imagined. Is always so exciting. But yeah, the first time that happened to me, which was so thrilling, was when I got to on Leprechaun Returns, see a couple of the casting tapes. And so before, while they were casting, and that was so exciting because I was oh, they're saying my lines. Yeah. That's so cool. And so that was such a. It's always so. For weirdly, that's almost even better because you get to see different people say it and their different takes on things, and sometimes what's nice is it's not the final. They'll be well, we're casting, but you haven't done I haven't done a rewrite or whatever, so it'll be funny to like hear something. And I was like, ooh, no, I gotta change that. That is not landing.
That's so
funny in my head.
Okay, so we've chatted about your horror history and your incredible creative work, but Suzanne, what movie did you bring with you today for us to discuss?
Ooh, I brought a movie from 1973 called Don't Be Afraid of the Dark.
Hell yeah. So for those of you unfamiliar, here's a brief synopsis of the film. A young couple inherits an old mansion inhabited by small demon-like creatures who are determined to make the wife one of their own.
They sure are.
They sure are.
They really...
It's exactly what they do.
Okay.
Their job. Yeah.
Give us your horror story about this movie. Why is this your Scarred for Life pick? How old were you when you saw it? How did you see it? I want to know. Set the scene. Tell us everything.
Okay. So, as I said, don't remember anything. But, so I don't remember how old I was. But it is the movie that, like I said, when you asked me to pick a movie, I was like, it's this one. And it has to be this one. And so I don't know when I saw it. My good assumption would be one night when my mother was out and I was home alone and I was like flipping channels and this was on. And I remember being so terrified of these voices whispering to this woman and nobody believing her. And she's like, she isn't sure enough to leave. She doesn't believe. And it's this idea that there's nowhere to go and that these like tiny things that nobody else sees are constantly coming for her. There's no rest. If there's a shadow, she's fucked. And so I just remember, and I just remember like being dragged, like the scene that was with me is being dragged down the stairs. And and so it was very interesting to revisit the movie and see it again and see what if it still sort of resonated for me.
Did it?
It did, and it did in a way. I had such an epiphany about it because I was like, of course I was terrified of this movie because it hit all of the things. As a kid, it being, like I said, like being alone in a house for most of the day,
right.
Or, I guess I went to school at some point, but often alone, where I would come home and I would, make myself something to eat, and I would walk home from school. I would, get a snack. I would sit in front of the TV. I'd do my homework, and I just like wait for my mom to get home. And I also remember never being believed about things, it's like, and always being sort of like, I'm always overreacting, and I feel like that was always a big thing with my family is I made too much of things. I was too sensitive. I was too,
Yep.
And so I was like, of course this terrified me that I've so connected to this woman who has this terrible husband, terrible husband who's obsessed with work. Yeah. And puts that above her, immediately is not like, well, maybe there's something weird about this house. Just immediately is like, you're crazy. You're trying to ruin my chances, my life. So be quiet. And her having to be like, all right, but I know my better instinct tells me something is really wrong, and shutting that aside because people telling her she's crazy.
I think the casting in this is actually really good because the actress that plays the main character, I need to pull up.
Kim Darby.
Yes, Kim
right?
Darby. She does not look like an adult. She comes across as like a 17-year-old. She's very young. And I was looking, I had to look up their age, and she was in her 20s and her husband was in his late 30s. He doesn't look like he was in his late 30s. He looks like he was in his 40s. But a lot of men at that time, at that decade, looked a lot older than they actually were. But that combined, his kind of looking older combined with her younger, I think makes her being like the perfect kind of proxy for kids watching this movie because she doesn't look much older than you are, than you could be,
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah.
Because I was staring at her like,
right.
first I was like, she looks like Linda Blair, because she reminded me so much of Linda Blair.
Yes,
and then I was like,
yes.
she looks so young. How? And I literally had to go look her up to see how old she was when she was filming this. Because like, she doesn't look like she's out of her teens very far.
You're right. And you're so right. That didn't even occur to me. When I watched it, I was like, God, she does. She looks so young, and she's very, like, she doesn't really have like a lot of makeup. She looks very like anybody, she doesn't look like a movie star. She doesn't look like an actor. Yeah. She looks very like this young woman with and these fabulous caftans.
And like that ginormous house, like it's like the creepiest, most haunted house looking house to ever house. Like, it looks like a gothic nightmare, but it's,
oh my God. Yeah,
exactly. And then, but it's really cool on the inside. Like, I was getting big Suspiria vibes from, like, especially the bathroom scenes and some of the lighting. Like, it was so interesting to see different parts of the house looking a range of different tones, from like weird kind of mod bathroom to like very old fashioned living room and dining room. It was just a very interesting house that's way too big for two people.
Yeah, it was and it was her grandmother's. And that was the other thing too that was so bizarre to me. Like, what a shitty grandmother. Her grandfather was sucked into this like tiny person hell. And she boarded up and was like, I'm going to leave it to my granddaughter and not fucking tell her. By the way, no matter what, like, it's a fabulous house, just like never open.
Just never open
Never.
If anything is ever like nailed shut or covered, like, just don't open it. It's that way for a reason, and you don't need to find out why. Just leave it.
Let it be, especially if the old handyman is like, do me a favor. But, like, why didn't he just say, like, yes, I know you'd sound crazy because he's like, if I say it, what's happened to that poor woman?
That's my question that I had watching this, because, like, I was watching with my roommate, and we were both a little irritated, like, why don't you just tell her? Because if you had told her, but then I was like, okay, but really, what is he going to say? You got to keep that closed. There are these little tiny troll-looking mole people that are hiding behind there, and they're going to get you if you open it. Like, would you believe them, or would you tear it down anyway?
No, you know what? No, but at least you could be like, you know what? There's like a weird gas leak, so just you're better off. Like, and that's why I hold up, because there's something weird. Like, you could have made something better up than like just don't do.
Like, there's like poisonous snakes or some shit in there. Like, you don't need to open it. Like, it's exactly. Like,
yeah. I mean, he could have, but in fairness, his job isn't to come up with, fake stories.
I do think that if someone tells me, those bricks are cemented 4 deep and reinforced with iron bars, I would be like, okay.
Yeah.
Part of me would be like, okay, I'm never going to touch that. But the other part of me, I'll be honest, that part that wants to go play with those Ouija boards and hold seances, be like, let's open it up. What if there is something in there?
I love that but, like, she's so meek in this movie. This is the one point where she's like, I do what I fucking want, and, like, bashes it in. And she's just like, well, she basically brings about her own destruction, but at least it's the one thing that she's able to do. But then at the same time, it can also feel like women meddling in things. Like, this is what happens when women take things into their own hands. They get carried away by the mole fairy creatures into the wilderness. It's
she didn't listen.
She didn't listen to her husband. She's unruly. She's not like listening to the men who told her.
Yeah.
This movie is so. I was just surprised at how much it was like women are crazy, or like not even that, but like how people think of women as crazy and like don't ever believe them and treat them like garbage.
But that's what I think is also so great about the movie is it does have that, like, yes, it's saying women are crazy, but also they have a reason to be.
Yes.
And we're not, and like you weren't listening, you weren't paying attention to what you just assumed she was nuts. And you know what? Now you lost your wife. And your house, probably. Good luck with that. And I love, like, he sort of turns at the end where it's like, oh, now that, I can't get in and the designer is dead. That poor guy. One of the other things about the movie that we had in my house growing up in New Jersey, we had those wall... They weren't like, it's not like a wall heaters, like that just, they were small and lined sort of one wall of the rooms in the house, and they made these weird banging noises.
Yep.
And so that to me, was another reason that was so weird is just like, there was always this, thing like, is something living in the walls? Because it would make, and it would always go on at like the weirdest times, like the middle of the night. And you know what's so funny is I remember when I was a kid having this terrible dream of a black cat opening my window and trying to get in to get me. And when I rewatched this movie, what is that first weird thing they show? It's just a weird black cat. And I was like, oh, this movie really affected me more than I remembered.
Just like nailed its way, like weaseled its way into your subconscious and said, forever, it will be part of you.
Yes. Yeah. And I also had like a very domineering grandmother. She was a lovely but challenging woman and very challenging with me in particular. And so I was like, it's no surprise to me that the movie that really stuck with me was one where the grandmother's legacy is an horror. Is a night, you know what I mean? Like the grandmother leaves her a horror, and with little regard for what it might actually mean for her. It literally steals her soul. Like, I was like, you just wrote this for
you,
young Susie Keilly. Be scarred for life.
Okay, I there's a couple things that have brought up that I really want to kind of hone in on. One of the things that I don't remember which one of you said it, but talking about how the husband goes from like 0 to 120 like immediately. There's a scene where he's like, see things my way, and she's like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to, and he's like, okay, how about some dinner? And it's like the way this movie feels so of that time period is ridiculous now watching it however many years beyond, because I'm terrible at math. What is it, like almost over 40 years, almost 50 years now by this point? And just like that dinner scene where he sits down with her and he's like, do you want this for me, this partnership? And she's like, of course I do. It's everything you worked for. And then she tries to like reason with him, saying it's all consuming. I wish you had more time and energy. And what's funny to me watching this was his response about like saying like, well, I will have more time. I promise. I just need to get through this. I need to go to San Francisco, get this promotion, and then I'm going to be handling this trust fund. And I'm just like, okay, I'm not hearing any time for your wife at this point, because you're going to get this promotion. You're going to be the one handling this trust fund. Yeah, you're going to have plenty of time at that point. But it's this all-consuming need for him to have success. And she is just like attached to him, because at the dinner party later on, there's the one guy that says like, what was the line?
Oh, like, how does it feel to be with someone, with a husband with a great future?
Yes. Like,
Wow.
Doesn't matter what she's interested in. Doesn't matter anything about her. It's like, you have a husband who's making big things, and that must be great for you. And I'm just like, wow,
Yeah.
this movie has this point of view. And I do feel like it is sort of kind of critiquing it in a way that surprised me for a movie in the 70s.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, perhaps we're just taking that from it and it wasn't the intention, but it did really feel like that was, I mean, of course it's commenting on it, it's this, this woman really is being tortured and I remember like when you were saying that, I remember at one point she thinks it's mice or rats or something. And that is even like, he can't, it's like, oh, she's overreacting because there might be a mouse, in the kitchen. Anybody would freak out if there was something living in the kitchen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, at no point someone's like, well, it must be like, you know what? I'll ask around for a good exterminator.
No.
Like it's all like from the get-go that she's a problem.
Well,
and meanwhile, lucky for him, she's brought a home to them, and then he's like, oh, I wish it was a condo. He really was really into a condo. Yeah, terrible man. I'm sorry, Mary.
No, and I was going to say, like, his whole thing is the dinner. He's like, well, are you going to be able to do the dinner? Are you going to be okay to do the dinner? Don't forget about the dinner. And it just, like, everything revolves around that, and, like, her ability to be a hostess and her ability to do all of the things for him and his coworkers. And that always, like, whenever I watch movies from like this time period where like the woman makes an elaborate dinner with multiple courses and like beautiful place settings and perfect wine pairings and everyone's just lounging and smoking and she's in the kitchen, it's like, that was a way of life, like hosting dinner parties like that. And you, one person, were expected to host all of your husband's friends and feed them. And if you didn't do that, you were a bad wife. Like,
yeah. And you had to be entertaining. Yeah. I'm like, maybe I don't feel like doing it this week. And I'm,
and then she ruins it. Ruins it. So,
on top of it. Well, she didn't ruin it.
Exactly.
I mean, she was attacked.
Like, and I was thinking in my head, I'm like, wouldn't someone else feel that fucker underneath? Like, they're small, but they're not that small, I feel like. And like, yanking out the napkin, and like, I was thinking in my head, I'm like, well, just let them yank the napkin and ignore it. But like, could you really ignore it if there's something like by your feet, like tugging things out of like off of your lap?
No, and they're horrifying to look at.
Yeah, they're so creepy. Yeah. Exactly. And she screams, and they're like, is her husband's like, do you have to go somewhere and you put on medication after you screamed in the middle of it?
His whole response to that was like, there was nothing there, nothing. And then his immediate response after that is, maybe you ought to go to a doctor. And then he says that he's going to take her by her hand and lead her inch by inch to see there's nothing wrong with this house. Cut to and this is where I think the movie is doing something to like kind of critique this, is that it cuts to the creatures climbing up the stairs right after he's talking about how he's going to lead her inch by inch so there's nothing here. Cut to creatures crawling up the stairs to torment her more. It's like, and that's why I do think that there's some like proto-feminist fears in this movie, where it's like, the sub-basement of like, as a metaphor, is being excavated. The ghoulies are literally telling Sally what they're going to do to her, and then they do it, and no one listens. No one is there to save her. The only people that know that she's telling the truth is the audience. There's like a lot of that kind of stuff in here. And I also think there's a little bit of it kind of talking about the changing role of women, because she's not the sort of prototypical 50s styled housewife. She's like having questioning. She's saying like, well, what if there's more? I have this house. My husband is working. He's making all this money. He's having all this success, but like, I'm not really happy. And she says this to him. She says this to her friend Joan, whose response is like, why don't we go spend their money?
Okay, but Joan is like my favorite. Like, she's a real friend, because she didn't believe her at first, but then she very quickly was like, you're fucking right. And she was pushing back against the husband and being like, there is something wrong. And like you don't see a lot of those kind of positive female friendships a lot of times in movies back then about like women supporting other women and defending them. It's always like their friends turn against them. So seeing something about women like really supporting each other like that was badass and made me really happy. I'm like, she's a good friend. Like, that is the friend you want on your side in a horror movie, who is like banging on the windows and doing everything she can to get back in the house and take care of you. Like, she's the MVP.
Yeah, and she, and she knew. She was like, I'll just come pick you up. Like, I'm not going to spend the night there. I'll come get you. You can spend the night with me. But, she gets there and all hell is breaking loose. And yeah, but she really tries. And it really is nice to see her try. But she had that great line, didn't it, at one point too, when they were shopping, where she says something and she's like, I know we're supposed to be feminists.
Yeah, she talks about women's lib.
I know women's lib, yes.
I wish this movie had turned out a little different. Like, I love the way this movie is, but like while I was watching, it's like, man, I just want them two to be like divorcees out in the town, like leave their husbands, leave her husband that's nicknamed Genghis Khan, and she leaves her husband, and they just go gallivant across, with their husband's money. That's what I wanted to see.
Do you know what? You just made me realize we got to write what happened to Joan after this.
Seriously,
it sent Joan on some self-discovery.
It had to us.
Yeah. I think we need to work on Joan's movie now.
I think we do. I need to, and she's dedicated her life to paranormal research now, and she's the first woman in the 70s to run a paranormal. All right, here it is.
Here's the movie. Let's do it. Podcast over. Let's go write this movie.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Every couple of episodes where I'm like, I have a movie idea, but it's so ridiculous, but it's like, that would be incredible.
Let me tell you, there's no ridiculous. There's, you know what I mean? Like, we've all seen some movies, and like, anything goes. I think never judge. One of my favorite movies this last year was called Slacks.
Slacks is so
Slacks
good.
Fucking rules.
Right? Like, there's no There was nothing too crazy.
A pair of
Bollywood
pants doing a
dancing
Bollywood
pants.
dance.
It was so good. It was just wonderful. They were just some mad pants. And
Listeners,
I
go
just
listen to
loved
our
it.
episode on that
Yeah.
because we did talk with the director of that.
Oh, you did? I have to hear.
She's-
Oh, you did?
yeah.
Oh, my
She is
goodness.
incredible.
All right.
She was fab.
She is incredible.
Oh, I loved that movie. That and I loved Pig. Oh,
I have
this,
heard
yeah.
Pig is really good. Mary Beth has seen it. I haven't seen it
Don't
yet.
get me started on Pig. Pig has a very
is so
special place in my heart.
Yeah.
We talked to the costumer of that though
understand.
too. We didn't realize it at the
What?
time, but like
Oh, we
when
did.
we talked to
Hannah.
yeah,
Was it Hannah?
yeah.
Big-
That's cool.
Yeah.
That was a great movie. So that's what I'm saying, though. You know, anything goes.
I
Crazier the better.
am
True.
curious about the monsters. Do you remember them as a kid? Did they scare you when you actually saw them? Because they're, you know, I mean, they obviously have kind of aged a little bit. Some of it kind of looks a little silly now, but like I think they're kind of that cute, creepy vibe going on.
Yeah, you know what's so funny to me is that I didn't remember. I remembered them obviously a little bit creepier than. I mean, they're still very creepy, but I remembered them a little bit more scary. Than they were, because my favorite thing was like there was like a short one, like they weren't all the same size, and I thought that was I was like they're I thought that was really funny. Or not funny, but it was just interesting that they weren't uniform. You know,
They had like little personalities that came out like
yeah.
it's just they had little personalities, which was weird and cool. But it made them even creepier because they were not just monsters, but
Yeah.
like little sentient beings that were very aware of what they were doing. Like they were chatting, like "Don't kill her yet." He's like, "Well, can I hurt her a little?" And like I don't. It was just so weird. I was like, "Oh no, they're like they're humanoid. Like this is very bizarre and uncanny."
Yeah, like what? Agreed. Like they were not like I loved that they talked because a lot, other times monsters don't talk, and it was just you're right that they had a personality that they were like discussing what they were going to do to her is also really awful.
Yeah,
and
they're mean.
yeah,
Ugh, they're nasty.
mean and yeah, and what are they? I mean, they wanted her soul, like they wanted to continue this thing, but they weren't doing much other than just sort of collecting souls. And then when she's like, becomes one and is like, we just wait, there'll be someone
Better
else.
time.
It's like, oh. And then does she become, like, and is one of them her grandfather?
I
See,
was
that's what
wondering
I'm
the
wondering.
same thing. Was one of and like, does he remember her or does he not? Like, is her memory or like is the memory kind of set back to zero when you become one of these things?
Yeah, I
many
don't.
questions.
I know. My guess is like maybe not, which is sort of sad because at least she would have that. But then that's also an interesting point too. Is like the fact that one was a family, her grandfather. So then that you're sort of there was no in a weird way there was no escaping it.
Yeah.
She was destined. I mean, she was really destined to go, and it's sort of sad when you think about it. Like she really was sort of set up for failure.
And this reminds me of fairy stories, like of fairies specifically, and like fae folk who are known for like kind of fucking with you and playing with you, kind of like playing with their prey. I really love like fairy folklore, and a lot of it's in like Irish and British movies. But this one had the fairy vibes of them like, they love to steal people and like take a price basically. So I kind of viewed them as little fucked up fairy creatures more than anything else because they had that vibe of like what their intentions were and how they liked to be tricksters and nasty, like not just do the thing right away, but like really scare some.
Yeah, they're so terrible, and their mouths didn't move. But I don't know if that, they didn't have mouths. They just sort of.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
I don't know if that was just a budget thing, but I was like, oh.
It's creepy though,
Didn't
like
even
regardless of
talk.
whether, I mean, I do think there are some times where it's like budget actually, or lack of a budget can actually make things even creepier. And this is one of those moments where it's like, yeah, they probably couldn't afford to do the mouth movements or like do that kind of stuff, but it gives it a very like uncomfortable edge to it that I think this movie, what it does better than anything else is create sort of like an oppressive mood. And it starts it from the very beginning with, we kind of talked about the kind of creepy house, but the way this movie opens where the camera is like pouring in and you just expect it to be sort of like a Hammer movie or like the 1930s, like Universal monster movie where it's a creepy house and there's like fog and stuff. And there's a craggy tree out front and all you hear are the whispers of like, will she come? It's just a matter of time. But like, it's that vibe that is established from the opening frame and it continues through the entire movie. And I think that I was thinking about this in particular because last year, well, I guess it's 2 years now almost, we talked about another made-for-TV movie from the 70s, Salem's Lot. And when we had talked about that movie, I had found an interview with Toby Hooper, who was talking about, because he's known for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, eventually going on to do Poltergeist. And this movie is so different from those because it was a lot more restrained because you're making it for television in the 70s on broadcast television. And so there's that he's like, you had to be more on like tone and more on suspense and that kind of stuff than you were on anything else. And I thought about that as I was watching this movie because it's the same way. This film has, there's not a whole lot of on-screen violence. There's definitely a lot of suspense and there's definitely like that kind of atmospheric oppression that I think this movie shares with Salem's Lot.
What I find so cool about, the cabin in the woods is such a cliche. It's such a useful place for a movie because, like you said, you're alone. Mm-hmm. And what an interesting thing that you can have a house in the middle of a city and still be so oppressed that you might as well be in the middle of nowhere, right? Because it's worse. It's like if you just felt that you were able to leave, you'd be okay. But she feels so oppressed and so alone that she keeps going back to the thing that's literally trying to steal her away.
Yeah, she has nowhere else to go, and that's. She gets a little bit of reprieve when she goes out with Joan to go spend, the money. But like, that's about her only time that we ever see her outside of the house is that, one moment. The rest of it is pretty much she's stuck in this house, not, being completely ignored. I am curious, have either of you or both of you seen the remake?
I have not.
Well, I remember this movie was like one that like really affected Guillermo del Toro, who produced that movie. There was like an interview with him at usatoday.com where he was talking about how it was something close to his heart for a very long time. And he says that my brothers and I would pursue each other in the house saying, "Sally, Sally," a taunt used to torment Darby's character in the original. We thought the movie was the most terrifying thing on earth, and I want to honor what works so well in that film. And I was thinking about this, Mary Beth, because you talked about the fairy tale aspect of these creatures. And he really leaned hard into giving them, in the remake, kind of a backstory as to what they're doing. And they are these little fairy tale creatures. And so he kind of...
I remember it being fairy. I remember seeing the ads and it being like they looked more like little fairies.
I don't think the movie completely worked, but
interesting.
It had some really good moments in it, I thought.
Yeah, sometimes for me, I'm okay with not knowing. Sometimes I think it's scarier to not know why someone wants to do something or some, or monster wants what it wants. I think there's something scarier in just knowing that it's going to do it regardless, because it doesn't matter. Like knowing doesn't change what they're, what they're going to do to you, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something kind of interesting, and that like, is it just that this house is unfortunate and was like on some hell pit or something, and that portal because it was so weird. Like when they got in, they kind of look up and down. It just seemed to be this endless, it was just this like cavern. It wasn't a real fireplace.
It wasn't I was just thinking about that because like it's a fireplace and you look in there and there's like no top and no bottom and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What is this?
Where does it go?
Yeah. Because
No, we're good.
I would just love the idea of it being like a pass down from generation to generation, the family's deepest secret that no one tells anybody else. They just sacrifice somebody to the weird fairy pit every generation or something.
It's almost like the grandmother had that, like, well, I had to pay my student loans, so,
so you all
my granddaughter should pay him too. Yeah, like I had to lose my husband, so you're
up next.
You're gonna have to, you're gonna have to. Someone in your family is gonna have to lose their soul. Like, no thought for why can't we all be happy?
One thing that I noticed on watching this that I was like, I don't know, maybe this was like a reshoot or something, but did you all notice that when Joan was outside, it looks like it's broad daylight when she's trying to break into the house back in?
No,
she's outside and it is supposed to be like midnight. It's middle of the night and she's outside because the creatures have cut the power. And so the house is dark and she's outside while poor, what's her name? Poor Sally. Poor Sally's on the inside. And it is like literally bright lights outside while she is moving around the house. And then it cuts to the husband driving and it is completely dark out. And I was like, oh, did this get a reshoot or how did that happen? Because it was really distracting me. I was like, what is going on here? Did they just have like a big like spotlight on her to make sure that people could see what she was doing? I don't know, but no one else noticed that?
You're right. No, I don't think I
did not notice that, but...
No.
Huh.
Yeah. Well, now you've ruined it for us. Thanks, Cherry.
Damn it.
No, I don't like the movie. No, I didn't. Apparently I was too into it. I did not notice at all. But that did remind me of one thing, speaking of lighting, which I actually thought was quite cool, was how the things had, like, there was like a green light.
Oh, the green light.
Oh, yes.
What a cool, I was like, wow, I'm going to steal that. Like, what a great little bit where it's like, even if you don't see it, but just to know, like, it's sort of a Pavlov's dog. I was like, oh my God, the green light's there. Yep. Oh my God, like, they're here. You can't see them. I don't hear them yet, but the green light is here. Yep. I thought that was such a great.
It was really cool.
Movie visual, that they have a light that surrounds them.
Terry, how many gaslit wives out of 5 do you give Don't Be Afraid of the Dark?
This movie surprised me. I had not seen it before. I had seen the remake, and I thought the remake was decent. So I wasn't really sure what to expect with this, particularly since it was a made-for-TV movies in the 70s. But I have to say that it really worked for me. I love the creepy, cute creatures. I love that oppressive atmosphere that it grabbed me from the opening scene. From the very start of the movie, I was like, ooh, something bad is going to happen. And then it has a very dark ending. Because, the thing is that, like, I think what really made me kind of sad watching this movie for her is that I think we were seeing her on the cusp of trying to find freedom and trying to, like, get that autonomy. And it ends with her getting dragged into something that is probably as bad, if not worse, than being stuck in this like, say, marriage, because she can't leave that house. She can't leave it. She's stuck here for eternity. And so I think there's something very dark about that I'm really surprised aired on ABC in the 70s on broadcast television. So I think this movie is actually really, really well done. Some slight special effects aside, I think that it is aged incredibly well. I think it's a 4 unfortunate gaslit wives out of 5 for me. What about you, Mary Beth?
I agree. I also think 4 gaslit wives. I was, again, surprised by this movie, a TV movie. It's really sad and just bleak. I did not expect this movie to be so bleak, and I love that because I love bleak films, and I love just how this one kind of was both fantastical and upsetting. And I just want to think more about it as like a folk horror-y movie. It feels like it has a lot of folk horror vibes, and I really enjoyed that. And as someone who is terrified of the dark and still is scared of the dark, this played on like my worst nightmare of like when the lights go out, something crawls out of the shadows. Like, I will have this fear my entire life. I'll watch so many scary movies and they don't usually scare me, but for some reason, that's like the one thing in my noodle that's always stuck is terror. Like, as soon as the lights go off, something appears. And this movie was just like very much that fear, and it got to me in a way I was not expecting, which I loved. So,
well, she wasn't safe anywhere. Like taking a shower, they're creeping in. Walking on the stairs, they're creeping in. At a dinner table around like dozens of people, they're still tormenting her from the darkness.
And they also know how to cut off the electricity. They know how to blow out candles. Like, it's not like once they're in the light, they're paralyzed. Like, they know how to turn things off. You're not safe because they understand how all that stuff works. And so that's just like my nightmare scenario. So I love that. And I loved it. But Suzanne, you have the final word. How many Gaslit Wives out of 5 do you give this film?
I agree with both of you. I would say 4 Gaslit Wives. I think that I think we're all in agreement on this. It really it held up for me. It brought back a lot of trauma. It reminded me of why it resonated so much for me, and I just thought it was a really interesting story, and I got more out of it than I thought I would revisiting it, and I'm so pleased that I did.
We're so pleased too. This was a good choice. So thank you so much, Suzanne, for joining us to talk about and kind of getting me to finally watch Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. Where can the listeners find you, and what do you have coming up that you can share?
Find me. You can find me on Twitter. I don't tweet a lot, but I stalk a lot. I'm not like, I like to read other people's tweets and tweet, and I respond to people if they reach out to me. But it's at Suzanne Keilly, and I'm working on a new movie, but I can't talk about it yet. I'm in the outlining stage, and this is one I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Hell yeah!
It's a horror. It's
awesome.
A horror. Sweet. But I can't talk about it yet.
Understand.
But hopefully you will see it at some point in the next year
there you
or so.
Go. And listeners, the movie Slumber Party Massacre is out on VOD, and if you wait a day, you can go get it on Blu Ray, which is I've already ordered it from Amazon.
I'm excited.
Hell yeah. So listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with Don't Be Afraid of the Dark? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us directly on Twitter. I'm at MB McAndrews.
And I'm a Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. And if you listen to us on Spotify, you can now rate us on Spotify. So go out there and do it, please.
Please. Thank you to Eric Power.
I'll do it.
Thank you. Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thanks everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.